identified. They would seem to threaten our continued operations here. Very definitely recommend destroying them.
That too many white women were expected to be there, and now this. So let's watch the clip from The View, and then I'll give you my reaction.
Well, there has been some controversy surrounding the Women's March organization, and Tamika, you came under some fire for your relationship with Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. Now, he's known for being anti-Semitic, for being homophobic, but you do attend his events, and you posted, I believe, a photo together calling him the GOAT, which means the greatest of all time. And you are running an organization that says it fights bigotry. Do you understand why your association with him is quite problematic?
I think it's important to put my attendance, my presence at Savior's Day, which is the highest holy day for the Nation of Islam, in proper context.
Okay.
You know, as a leader, as a black leader in a country that is still dealing with some very serious unresolved issues as it relates to the black experience in this country, I go into a lot of difficult spaces. I wrote a piece immediately following the beginning of this controversy, talking about wherever my people are, that's where I must also be. And everywhere that I go is difficult. The Women's March was very difficult. I met with a lot of women who did not even understand why race was important to be a part of the conversation as it relates to women's rights issues. And there was a lot of, offensive rhetoric that I heard. And just because you go into a space with someone does not mean that you agree with everything that they say.
Wow, what a weak argument. So Tamika is apparently fine with overlooking Lewis's anti-Semitism and instead championing him because she thinks he's done a lot of good work for the black community. I just want to point out that these are the same activists who support the removal of historical monuments and the renaming of buildings that honor our founding fathers on the grounds that they owned slaves. So it seems hypocritical to me how she's willing to cherry pick and make excuses for Lewis, but then refuses to apply the same nuanced approach when it's inconvenient to her cause. Just wanted to point that out.
Let me push back a little bit. Why call him the greatest of all time?
I didn't call him the greatest of all time because of his rhetoric. I called him the greatest of all time because of what he's done in black communities. And I think that,
Let me just interject really quickly. I would never be comfortable supporting someone who called, I'm not anti-Semite and I'm anti-termite. It's the wicked Jews, the false Jews that are promoting lesbianism, homosexuality. I actually spoke with a journalist from Tablet magazine who released an investigation report on your organization. And in part, they alleged that there is a lot of anti-Semitism surrounding this march. Specifically, the report alleged that you, Tamika, and co-founder Carmen Perez asserted that, quote, Jewish people had a history of exploiting black people and were proven to be leaders of the American slave trade. Now, a lot of people, by a lot of people I include me in this, think that you're using your organization as anti-Semitism masked in activism and that you're using identity politics to shield yourself from critiques. You're talking about all women being invited to that march. I'm pro-life. We were not invited. We were not allowed at that march right there. I'm a conservative woman. I also represent, if you're talking about women, you're talking about all women, including Jewish women as well, and conservative women.
Well, Megan,
Are those allegations true?
well, first of all, those allegations are not true. That is not how that meeting happened. And the Women's March...
So the journalist I spoke to was lying?
The people that the journalist spoke to did not tell the truth. Period. I'll stop.
That's it.
And I think it's important for us to understand and all be very clear in this room that the Women's March unequivocally condemns anti-Semitism, bigotry,
Condemn Farrakhan's remarks about Jewish people.
Yes, and we have repeatedly, in statement after statement this year, which are available directly on our website for anyone to read, we condemn any statements of hate, and we've actually been working so hard over the last 2 years to fight this type of hate over and over again, and we're committed to repairing any harm because we understand that the Jewish community is feeling hurt right now, and we want to make sure...
I don't speak for Jewish people, but I think I'm just confused. These remarks are, I mean, it goes on death to Israel over and over again.
We did not make those
We did not
remarks.
make-
You can't
But
put
you're
these
associating with a man
And
who
so
does
what
publicly.
I will say to you is that I don't agree with any of Minister Farrakhan's statements.
Specifically about Jewish people.
As I said, I don't agree with many of Minister Farrakhan's statements.
condemn them?
I don't agree with these statements. At the end of the day...
You won't condemn it.
No. To be very clear, it's not my language. It's not the way that I speak. It is not how I organize. And I think it is very clear over the 20 years of my own personal activism, my own personal track record, who I am, and that I should never be judged through the lens of a man.
New message is received from 3395.
That is actually not what this woman is supposed to do.
I don't want to be judged through the lens of something that's speaking for all women. When you're associated with extreme anti-Semitism, are you comfortable, both of you, being on stage with a Trump supporter, someone who's pro-life, someone who is a very, vociferous?
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
Are you going to have a Trump-supporting woman, conservative pro-life woman on stage as next one?
There was absolutely no people coming in
This is
on
pro-life women.
That is not true. And I actually have pro-life women in my family who, as a result of the Women's March, have been engaging in racist conversations over the last years that have helped expand all of our understanding. We welcome pro-life women. We welcome conservative women to the Women's March. The Women's March is open to
I
all.
appreciate you both coming
And so my last question is, do you understand why people feel that stepping down might put some air between all of this for a conversation to continue?
I also don't want to be and so I just provide their directions to my leadership, and I am until my turn at this one.
All right, so first of all, keep that honor straight up lying about pro-life women being welcome at the march. It's been well reported how the Women's March was happy to be a partner with Planned Parenthood and refused to partner with pro-life organizations. So if you want people to believe that you're opposed to all women, you can prove that easily by agreeing to partner with pro-life organizations as well. But obviously, this march isn't about women. It's about promoting far-left intersectional ideology. Women who don't support this ideology, which is at least 45 to 50% of all American women, they are not welcome at your march. Anyway, I want to finish up with this National Review piece that was published as a response to Tamika and Bob's appearance on The View. So as you saw, Tamika refused to categorically condemn Farrakhan's anti-Semitism, but both her and Bob did deny claims about them peddling anti-Semitic conspiracy theories at their inaugural meeting. So in response to the controversy created by Mallory's Instagram post, Women's March issued a statement condemning bigotry in general without mentioning Farrakhan specifically. A number of regional Women's March chapters, as well as the original Women's March founder Teresa Shook, disaffiliated from the organization in response to the group's perceived sympathy for anti-Semitism. A recent report in the magazine Tablet further cemented the Women's March reputation as an anti-Semitic organization. The report, which Women's March leaders have dismissed as inaccurate, alleges that Mallory and her fellow co-chairs disseminated anti-Semitic conspiracy theories at the first meeting they held following President Trump's election. The report states that during the initial Women's March meeting, Mallory and co-chair Carmen Perez asserted that Jewish people bore a special collective responsibility as exploiters of black and brown people, and even, according to a close second-hand source, claimed that Jews were proven to have been leaders of the American slave trade. The third annual Women's March on Washington, D.C. is set to take place Saturday, and a number of progressive groups that previously sponsored the march, which are shown here, appear to have quietly dropped their support for the group, as their names are no longer listed as sponsors on its website. Alright, so obviously it's great to see the left eating their own and dropping support for the Women's March. That's exactly what should happen in light of all that's come out. But as far as Tamika and Bob's denying that they were secretly peddling anti-Semitism, you know, it's he said, she said at this point. They said that the Women's March affiliates who leaked the information were lying, but if that's true, then why were you associating and planning with them in the first place? That's what I would like to know, but they didn't offer any explanation about that, so I have to remain skeptical. In any case, even if they were telling the truth, it still doesn't do much to exonerate their support for Farrakhan and also for Sarsour. But anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments. How do you think Tamika and Bob handled themselves here? Post it below, and I'll see y'all in the next one.
Asylum. We call it a mental hospital, but it's an asylum. told him about how we used to have sleepovers and were close growing up. High school separated us a bit. Tim caught and spoke about triggers. He really didn't care too much for the psychological terminology. So I let him keep talking until Tim through. And I thought he expected better in a place like this. Tim's room was one of those defensive asylum cells. They had walls and floor. A small window at the door, and I thought Tim was passing. I'll leave you two alone, said the doctor after opening the door. I went in. Tim had not aged in days since I last saw him. His face, at least, though his eyes were sunken and lifeless, remained the same. His body seemed to have grown. Tim? I said, got it. I tried to lighten up the mood a bit. It's a pretty nice place you got here. Even feed you, I see. No cooking or dishes. Maybe I ought to go insane too. People tell me sometimes my humor can be crude, but I thought it was funny. Tim didn't seem to mind it. Then again, didn't say anything the whole time. I ended up talking for almost an hour, thinking it might get him to say something. I asked questions, told him what everyone had been up to, who was asking about it, and anything else I could think of. After that hour, he slid his legs to the side and passed me the letter that was resting underneath. You want me to read it now? I asked, and he shook his head. Are you gonna say anything? Talk to me, maybe? He shook his head again. Alright, well, I'm going to get going then. I told him. Didn't make any movements. I left and found Dr. Wobbler. He was amazed that I had the letter and asked if Tim said anything. I told him what happened, and I could tell he really wasn't listening. His eyes never left the letter. Finally, he asked what I knew he wanted to know. May I have a look? His obsession turned me a bit hostile, and I refused him, and he didn't push further. He told me I would be contacted if anything improved or if Tim wanted to see me again. But I can't imagine that happening anytime soon. When I got home, I read the letter. It's pretty messed up. Chris, it was good to see you. I imagine if you were reading this and you came to see me. I cannot say if I'm okay or not, but I want you to know what happened to me. I'm not sure when it began. There was something that always made me feel safe in the light. I know you hated having the light on when we slept, but it was the only way I got any rest. It always felt like there was something there keeping me safe. When high school came, you know as well as that, things changed. I started staying up later. Warcraft was better than homework, but talked to me. One night, though, I saw one of them. Not the people in the game. The people in the corners. That night, I logged off my computer, and when I turned, I saw one. In the corner of the room, they waited, head down, their greasy long hair covering their face. They were dressed in a white gown, without shoes.
One day I shall return to the city.
They did not move.
For now, there are plenty of
like a
battles
girl, but
ahead.
I just couldn't
This
tell.
one, I believe, is
I ran to my
yours.
dad and woke him up from his drunken sleep. He was angry. Came back into the living room for me to check. There was nothing there. I checked the house and looked into every open space, but there was no sign of anything. The doors were still locked and the windows too, and nothing to suggest this person was anything more than imaginary. After that, my dad said to never wake him up for something like that again. He would send me to drink more at night. I was shaken, but I managed to fall asleep. It still felt like they were watching me. A few nights went by and I didn't see them again. Not directly, at least. You know when you turn your head and something seems to be just out of sight, then you turn and it's nothing? It was like that each night. I swore I could see the black hair dangling down. Whenever I turned, it was just the same empty, dark corner. Then one night, I awoke in the middle of the night. They were hovering over my nightlight, two of them swaying side to side. One larger and taller, but still with the same long hair. I called out to them and they didn't move. Then I turned on the light. They turned and faced me. Their faces, young faces, too small for their bodies. So ravaged by fatigue that their eyes had drooped down to their cheekbones. They ran towards me. I screamed, shutting off the lights and hiding under my covers. I kept screaming for my mom, my dad, anyone. My mom was not home and my dad might as well have been dead with how much he was drinking. Just trying to convince myself that it was a nightmare. I had no courage to see if they were still there. Curling into a ball, I laid until my mom came home in the morning. She opened my door and asked why I wasn't at school. She didn't believe me. The next night, I slept with all the lights on, and when I woke up in the middle of the night, they were there. Just stood there and stared. Their eyes were black, except for their iris. I yelled and they didn't move. Finally, I took a box of tissues on my nightstand and threw it at one, and it bounced off. They were real. They were real, and they were real. I scrambled to get my phone and snapped the picture. That's when they charged. I hid under the covers, the light on my ceiling shedding light inside. Shadows passed over the blanket and I felt the weight of their bodies sink into my bed. I was stuck. I screamed and kicked, but they grabbed me by my ankles and wrists. One grabbed hold of the blanket and pulled it down. Their sunken faces stared and I couldn't get free. The letter had spots of moisture here and I think Tim was crying when he wrote it. They told me they were afraid of the dark too. Their voices echoed from their throats. Fear the dark. We fear the dark. Search for the light to follow the spark. Come with us, there is nothing to fear. Swallow all those salty tears. We cannot take you in the day, but at night we are here to stay. In the corners we will wait. This can be your only fate. They began to chant it, still holding me down. They covered my mouth, their hands smelling like rotting flesh. I couldn't do anything but cry. They came closer and licked the tears from my eyes and sucked them from my cheeks. I was in hell. When the morning came, they vanished and I haven't spoken a word to anyone since. Not until I asked the doctor to my paper to write to you. My mom found me in the morning, wondered why I didn't go to school. When she opened the door to yell at me, she knew something was different. Something had gone terribly wrong. She blamed my father for it and they fought. I opened the picture on my phone to them and they looked at me confused. Why was I showing them a picture of an empty corner? They kept fighting until they decided I needed to get some help. But it would have to wait till tomorrow. My mom was working a double that night. She left, despite my whimpers. My dad scorned me for forgetting how to talk. He told me to piss off and found a big gift Jack Daniels. I was out before sunset. From the front window, I watched the sun peek beyond the trees and houses until it was gone altogether. I saw through the reflection in the glass, I've been standing by the floor lamp. I ran and kicked it over before it could grab me and both shattered on the ground. The thing disappeared. I looked down the hallway where the kitchen light still shone and it was the only way down to my bedroom. At the entrance, 3 of them waited, peering down the dark hallway. I slunk away into the darkness of the room, covered my eyes. My father snored in the chair next to me. The darkness played with me. I still saw the faces of those things. They were all around me, but this time I could swat at them and it faded to nothing. My mind was playing its tricks on me, the same tricks it did before I had a nightlight. It loved to show me monsters in the nighttime. Knowing they weren't real was the only thing that kept me from running out of the house that night. When dawn came and the sun was about to rise over the horizon, I looked back down the hallway at the creatures standing there. It was the same as before, but more crowded in. As the sunlight pierced the sky, they all faded to dust. That day, my parents admitted me to the hospital. Those things are here too, and they haunt me every day. I've covered lights on. What? Writing that shit down made it real, like, Tim is actually insane. Or, I hate stuff like this, you know how it gets into your head. Like, when you watch a horror movie with some deformed lady waiting in the bathroom at night, you flick on the lights to see her there. Then you have to go to the bathroom at night and you know how fake it was. But your blood still chills before you turn the light on. I got that feeling now that someone's watching. That someone's in the corner. Or someone is watching.
I have an enemy commander in my sights. I think the honor of this kill, however, is yours.
A Glimmer mining crew.
Shut them down.
They're heading to another site.
Clancy Foster presents Made a Cabinet Out of Cursed Wood. Written by N.S. Lewis. Narrated by Clancy. When I was 12 years old and living in my childhood home in Maine, a wicked nor'easter blew in, wreaked havoc on our front yard. In the morning, the snow had finally stopped moving around. I surveyed the damage in the kitchen window with my father. Branches were strewn across a thick layer of snow. I was crestfallen and discovered that the birdhouses, which I had worked hard to craft with my father's help, which during winter months hung from bare branches that the goldfinches were nowhere to be seen. My father's smoking chair, hung clean off the covered porch, now lay buried in the snow, 3 legs poking up into the cold air. But the most impressive thing the storm did was bring down an old ash tree. The tree was massive, gnarled, ancient. It had split halfway up the trunk, and the bulk of it lay dead in our yard. Get your snow pants on, sonny boy, my old man said, sipping his coffee. Looks like we got some work to do. I didn't mind. I usually had a good time helping my dad, and he always imparted me with the various bits of wisdom and knowledge he had piled up in his head. I got dressed, and we headed outside, where the snow was up to my knees. My father walked around the fallen tree, studying it. All that is good firewood, he said, tracing out a section of thick, twisted branches with his finger. But he pointed to an enormous branch, which was, itself, as big around as most of the other trees in our immediate yard. But that, I can get a few planks out of that chunk there. See how it's nice and straight? At least make a little jewelry box or something for your mother. He paused to light up the smoke. Damn tree's been here forever. The gal's heartbroken the thing finally fell over. That's where I come in and make her happy again, see? Let me tell you something right now, my boy. You listen good. You got yourself a happy wife, you got yourself a happy life. Now run along to the shed and get the chainsaw. We worked all morning. Mostly, I hauled the wood, but I did get to use the chainsaw on some of the smaller branches, which thrilled me. I dragged the chunks of firewood back by the shed for further processing as my father trimmed up the lumber log. As I was stacking the wood, I looked across the field behind our house and saw that another tree had fallen, right at the edge forest. I told my father, and when he was finished with the ancient ash, he went to have a look. Red oak, said my dad, looking it over. Nothing special, but I can get a few pours out of it and the rest will burn up just fine. And all that's just as good as money and pay. We got to work on that, and when we were finished, my father got the tractor and loaded both the oak and ash lumber logs into the back of his pickup truck. Tomorrow, I'll get these sawn up at the mill. Can I come? I asked. You promised that I could come. Did I now? Yeah, 2 years ago. That time that cherry tree fell down? The old man mulled it over. You'll be having school tomorrow. You promised, Pop. Well, when a man's word becomes worthless, man becomes worthless, I always say. Alright, kiddo, just don't tell your mother. The next morning, my father told my mom that he would take me to school. But we went to the local lumber yard instead. They had a bandsaw mill set up there, and I watched in amazement as it went to work slicing out the oak log. A man named Jeff Bloomfield was operating the mill. He rolled the oak log into the carriage, and the long blade took a pass, trimming off a section of the round part. Then Jeff pushed a button, and mechanical arms lifted up and rolled the log onto its flat surface. The blade traversed the log again to create a second flat surface. This happened twice more until the log was squared up. And on the fifth pass, the mill produced a board. I grabbed one end while my dad grabbed the other, and we carried it over to his truck while Jeff began slicing the next board. I marveled at all of the interesting color and grain that was hiding beneath the bark of the tree. It's awesome, I shouted above the hum and buzz of the mill. I rarely saw my father smile, but when he looked back at me then, one side of his mouth was pulled up towards his eye, which, for him, passed as a smile. We got 5 boards out of the oak log, then we rolled the ash log into the carriage. Once again, Jeff squared up the log, but this time, when the blade passed through to cut the first board, he let out a terrible screech. It sounded like somebody was screaming. Jeff slammed his hand on a big red button. The machine stopped, the blade halfway through its cut. This log's no good, said Jeff. And your time changing it. Jeff shrugged. Wish I had that kind of dough, he muttered, starting the machine back up. The blade struggled through the log, screaming every inch of the way. When it had almost made the full pass, there was a sudden crack, and the mostly sawn board split the rest of the way off the log and flew, end over end, through the air. Fuck! Jeff screamed. I looked over to see my dad frowning as the board arched up towards the ceiling and then came crashing down on a pile of lumber on the other side of the room. That's it, said Jeff. No more from this log. It's gonna get somebody killed. You're not gonna be able to use this shit anyway. It's gonna be a goddamn pretzel by the time it dries. My dad scowled, then walked across the room, picked up the ash board, and threw it in the back of his truck. Fine, he said to Jeff. What do we owe? Jeff wrote out a ticket and handed it to my father. Don't you bring any of that homegrown shit around here anymore, he said to my dad. Could have killed somebody. We drove around to the main building, went up front and paid. On the ride back to school, I asked my dad why that board had flown through the air like that. Even after it's dead, it is still alive, he said. It's got all kinds of forces working away on it, wanting to twist it, make it expand and contract, the grain pulling it in different directions. That's why you use the straight logs. This one was straight, so I thought it wouldn't be so bad. But I was wrong. There's a lot of tension in this one.
Welcome to the show. We've got several
That night, I had a terrible dream. A hooded figure was chasing me in the woods. I ran as fast as I could, but it wasn't good enough. The figure kept closing in. Then I tripped over a branch and fell on my behind and was standing over me.
Guardians are my
I saw a
responsibility.
big, fleshy
Get in,
nose
get
poking out of the
and
hood,
don't die.
above thin, sour lips, next to what I thought looked like a faint scar across the figure's cheek. The face looked familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. I screamed as it began reaching. The next day, Billy Bloomfield got called to the principal's office during second period English. He didn't come back. I later found out that his father, Jeff, died of a heart attack that morning. 25 years later, my mother and father died in a car crash. I was living in Tampa, Florida at the time, managing a commercial millwork and cabinet shop. My wife was a corporate lawyer downtown. We both took time off to fly to Maine, make all the funeral arrangements, and deal with the estate. I was an only child, so it all fell to me. Jane was a great help, and frankly, did almost all of the work, while I could barely hold myself together with grief. It was there, after the funeral, sitting in my parents' house and drinking wine, we decided we would stay in that house. Though we made good money, both felt already burnt out on our retrospective career paths, and neither of us were enamored by Tampa. Jane thought it was too hot, and I thought there were too many people there. The kicker was when I suggested that the little town I grew up in was a great place to raise kids. We had just started trying a few months back, and hadn't yet found out that Jane was infertile. And all of that reasoning was good and true, but deep down, there was something else. Something that I couldn't explain to Jane, because I didn't understand it myself. I belonged there. In that town, in that house. I just belonged there, and being there made me feel whole again, in a way that I hadn't felt for a long time. We dutifully returned to Tampa in order to ease the transition for our employers. We didn't know what the future held and didn't want to burn any bridges, but the whole time I was there, I felt intense pressure to return to my true home. When we made it back to Maine, this time, I felt for good. I took a look around the old man's shop as the bittersweet memories crashed over me. It saddened me to see that, since he had retired, my father had apparently spent little time there, as the place was becoming run down. The building itself had once been an old barn, and his life, my dad had modernized it somewhat, putting fiberglass insulation up between the posts, but never getting around to covering the walls with plywood or drywall. When I turned on the lights, a startled squirrel glared at me in horror for a moment, before scampering out through a hole that had been chewed in the exterior wall. Some of the drawers in the shop were full of bits of wool and other material that mice had gathered from somewhere in order to make their nests. I walked past the machines, still covered in sawdust from when my dad had used them, and fought back tears as I approached the room where the wood was stored. It was a large, uninsulated room with a dirt floor. What was once a horse stable, I think. A tripod with halogen work lights stood in the center, plugged into an extension cord coming from the machine room. I clicked the lights on and looked around at the stacks of wood. Off in the corner, leaning against the wall by itself, I saw it. That old plank of ash we had sawn up so many years ago. Somehow, I knew that's what it was. Before, I was close enough to really identify it with my senses. And once I was close enough to do that, my heart sank. I could see that it was horribly twisted. A goddamn pretzel. But worse than that, it was mostly rotten. The end that was sitting in the dirt was black with rot. And this continued out most of the board until I saw just 2 feet or so of the natural brownish yellow of ash wood at the top. And as I got closer, I smiled. That top bit, it was spalted. Spalted wood is where a certain type of fungus has made itself at home. Usually looks like somebody has taken a fine-tipped ink pen and drawn intricate lines on top of the natural grain pattern of the wood. Let this process go on too long, wood becomes rotted. Catch it just in time, and it's beautiful. I grabbed the plank and carried it over to the radio alarm saw in the other room. The blade groaned as I pulled it towards me, and wanted to bind up, but I got through the cut. I was able to preserve about 30 inches of board.
No, Just us down here.
The first year back in Maine was rough. Jane was starting her own solo law practice, and I was starting my own solo woodworking business. It was crazy, but we're driven. Even so, without a nice little nest egg left over from Tampa and a free place to stay, not to mention the fact that I already had a shop at my disposal, we never would have been able to do what we did. On top of everything else, this is when we found out that we could never have biological children together. Because business was slow to build, and I often had stretches of time where I had to make myself busy or go insane with anxiety, I began building a little cabinet. Mostly, I wanted to build something out of that ancient spalted ash, to honor my mother and my father.
We came
My
down
mother,
here as a
because she
squad
had
of
cared
9.
deeply about that
Got
tree.
picked off one by one.
My father,
Watched a
because
wizard
he had
rip
mostly
the light
taught
out
me
of my
the
best
trade.
friend and funnel it
There was
into
just
some
enough
kind
wood
of
to saw in
crystal.
half along its thickness to make 2 book-matched door panels.
These are all
So that is why I designed the piece around. There's a little cabinet on a stand. The stand is red oak, the same oak that I cut up with my father that winter day so many years ago. The case of the cabinet is ash, not from the ancient tree that fell down in our yard that day, but from another tree on the property. The doors are frame and panel, and the frame being some nice curly white oak that I found in the shop, and the panels being, of course, spalted ash. I worked on it slowly, whenever I couldn't fill the time with something that I felt was actually productive. During our second year in Maine, business picked up for both Jane and I, so I had less and less time to work on the cabinet. And it sat for a while, forgotten, in the loft where it wouldn't take up shop space. One day, I went up there for one thing or another, and I saw the nearly finished piece. I took it downstairs and spent the next 3 days finishing it up, pushing back my deadlines. I sprayed a few coats of shellac on it, then stepped back and looked at it for a long time. It was good, not great. The wood in its arrangement was spectacular. It made the piece worthwhile, but the design fell flat near the top of the piece. I had taken an improvisational approach to the design, which sometimes paid off with unplanned creativity, and sometimes didn't. Here's a photograph of the finished cabinet, sitting in my messy shop. I liked it well enough to bring it to the house, and decided that it would look better with something sitting on top of the cabinet. I thought some bottles might look nice, so it became our liquor cabinet, the day before we were to host a dinner party. I carried it into the house, and with all the liquor we bought from the kitchen cabinets, the cabinet that I had just made. I put an ice bucket on top, along with a bowl of limes, a cutting board, a knife, and a few select bottles of expensive liquor. Inside, behind the doors, were a few bottles of wine, different kinds of glasses. When Jane came home and saw it, she was delighted. "It's gorgeous, honey," she said. "What'll it be?" I asked, opening the doors and pulling out a tall, thin glass.
No,
G&T,
don't
please.
come down here.
I made up 2 gin and tonics and handed her one.
Takeo, listen.
Cheers,
We can use the crystal
I said.
to disrupt the ritual.
Cheers, she said. And we
Yeah,
cleaned
great
glasses.
idea. But there aren't any
We had a few drinks, then went
Never mind.
to the bedroom.
Going with that plan.
That night, I dreamt that we were in the hospital.
Not yet.
My wife was giving birth. The doctor bent down, then came up with a crying baby. "It's a girl," he said. Then a dark red spot appeared on his face mask. His eyes opened wide, with the red spot larger, the blood soaking into the fabric of the mask. Just before he dropped to the ground, he threw our child into the air, and I dove across my wife to catch her. Standing where the doctor had stood 1 second ago were 2 men in black hooded robes, holding bloody knives. I couldn't see their eyes, but I thought the features I could make out looked familiar. I knew them, somehow. They lunged, knives out, at my baby. The evening of the dinner party was upon us, and Jane and I were in the kitchen doing the final prep before the guests arrived. Jane had become friendly with Denise Hall, who worked at the credit union in town, did a lot of transactions with Jane. Jane had invited Denise and her husband Tom, as well as Jane's sole employee, Erin Bloomfield, and her husband, Billy. "I've never hosted a mayor before," she said, taking a sip of her red wine. I could tell that she was actually nervous,
You
I
did
laughed.
not die in vain.
Tom Hall? I said. Our esteemed mayor? I was in the same room with him, senior prom after party, when he pissed his pants, passed out in the middle of the floor. People drew dicks on his face, that kind of thing. We got nothing to worry about. Jane looked at me. The same kind of thing is true for most powerful men in America. They got drunk at a party, maybe even raped somebody once. But still, they hold power and it's real. I frowned. Yeah, but Tom's okay. I mean, I haven't really talked to him for a while, but... I trailed off and took a sip of my beer. It was strange. I was suddenly very wary of Tom Hall. I shook it off and changed the subject. I'm looking forward to meeting Karen. Now, Jane smiled. Yeah, well, it figures that my paralegal would be married to another person that you went to high school with. Small town. Billy Bloomfield? Yeah, we went to high school together, but we weren't in the same crowd. Jane put the final garnishes on the salmon and stuck it in the oven. Well, apparently he remembers you quite well, she said. Oh, said Tom, leaning back in his chair, patting his belly. That was so delicious, Jane. Thank you. Hey, I said, putting on a fake scowl. I helped too. Of course you did, dear, said Tom's wife, Denise. Then she turned to Jane and said, thank you. It was wonderful. You did well for yourself, friend, said Tom to me. Taking a sip is old-fashioned. Back in high school, you couldn't get a date to save your life. Now you end up with the creme de la creme. Don't be an ass, Tom, said Denise, good-naturedly slapping his shoulder. Tom guffawed. Well, thank you for the compliment, Jane said, putting on a smile that I knew was forced. It's been wonderful having you here. Couldn't find no one to have his demon child, muttered Billy Bloomfield to his rum and coke. Billy's wife, Karen, dropped her mouth open in shock.
It's time.
William, she said. What's that, Billy boy? Said Tom. Speak up. Couldn't find no whore to have his demon child in high school, and now I guess he found him one, said Billy loudly now. He's drunk, said Karen, her face flushed red. We should go now. She stood up. That's not a bad idea, said Tom, sitting forward now and frowning. You know what I mean, Tommy, said Billy. Some bitch got that witch blood in him. Some bitch killed my daddy. Your father died of a heart attack, Billy, I said. He was putting me on edge. I wanted him out of my house before he did something. It was tragic, but it had nothing to do with me. Billy slammed his glass on the table, rage overtaking his eyes, turning his face red. Weren't no goddamn heart attack, he shouted. Goddamn witch magic. You or your mama. Under the table, I felt my hand begin to shake. I think it's time you went home, Billy, I said. Yes, said Karen. Come on, you fool. It's time to go home. I'll go home, said Billy. But you're gonna get yours, he said, pointing at me with a steady finger. Shit, Billy, said Tom. Come on, I'll walk you out. Billy whipped his head around to face Tom.
Do you copy?
You know.
Yes, we're here.
Don't you lie now.
The hive. But
come on, buddy,
those
said Tom, standing up.
Aren't coming home.
Let's get you on home now. Tom walked Karen and Billy out while Jane, Denise, and I sat in shocked silence. After a few minutes, Tom opened the front door and walked back to the table. I guess we should be going too, he said. What the fuck was that? I said. Tom? Guy just had one too many. He does that, said Tom. Come on, Denise, time to get home and feed the dogs. No, I said. You knew what he was talking about. What did he mean? Witches' magic? Tom laughed. Seemed good-natured, but wasn't quite sure. You never heard it, did you? He said. Heard what? In high school, there was a rumor going around that your mother was a witch. Damn fool took it to heart, I guess. No, I never heard that. Well, now you have. We all know it's the sort of hurtful nonsense that kids cook up in high school. Everyone knows that now, even if they didn't then. Everybody but old Billy Bloomfield. He thinks I killed his father, I said, still in disbelief. He really thinks that. He's a drunk, said Denise. That he is, said Tom. And now I think we ought to go, darling. He turned to Jane. Can't thank you enough for the delicious meal. You got the magic touch. Thank you, stuttered Jane, still quite obviously in a state of shock. Thanks, Jane, said Denise, still turned to me. And you too, of course. She stood up. Well, we'll see you tomorrow, Jane. You two have a good night. Thanks for coming, I said, forcing a smile. When they were gone, Jane turned to me and said, "What the fuck was that?" I have no idea, I said. Karen didn't make it into work the next day. Billy Bloomfield died of a stroke early that morning. As fate would have it, Tom Hall also died that morning of a heart attack. When I heard the news, a thought occurred to me. They were the ones in the dream where Jane was giving birth to our child. They were trying to harm it. It wasn't quite them, but it was very close. A few days later, Jane showed me the stick. She must have had it left over from when we had been trying. There were 2 lines there. We went out and bought another one. 2 lines again. She was pregnant.
The fallen are an afterthought.
I opened the cabinet, withdrew a short, wide glass. I put the glass on the top of the cabinet and poured some scotch into it, then took it over to the dining table. I sat down and remembered. It was a long time ago, a few hundred years ago. There was a woman being chased by a mob of men. The woman looked like my mother. Not exactly, but close. And the men, I recognized many of them. Not directly, but as facsimiles. The same way that Billy and Tom were in my dream, but not quite. The same way I now realized that Billy's father, Jeff, was in my dream all those years ago. But not quite. It was their ancestors that I was seeing in my dreams. It was their ancestors chasing down my mother's ancestor. I now saw clearly in my mind. Now they were upon her. They put the noose around her neck, pulled her up. Rope strung across the straight, sturdy branch of a young ash tree. I want to give a huge thanks to last month's $5 and up patrons. Jeffrey B, Viva Bavaria, 1516, Melted Dre.
Before we get to the news, this is an urgent message. Before watching this report, please subscribe to our backup channel. Link is in the description below. Thank you. Got some late-breaking news now. Those MAGA hat teens, they just got some huge news direct from President Trump. Guess where they are invited? Charlie Spearing for Breitbart News reports President Trump will meet with students from Covington Catholic School at the White House. That's according to the conservative commentator Laura Ingraham. She broke the news on Twitter with this exclusive on the Laura Ingraham podcast. The Covington Catholic students threatened by the leftist internet mob will be meeting with real Donald Trump at the White House as early as tomorrow. Now, she was referring to her new podcast show for details. Now, students from Covington High School were targeted by an angry online mob over the weekend who falsely blamed them for instigating conflict with a Native American activist, a known Native American activist on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. following the March for Life. Last night, Donald Trump Jr. spoke with Laura Ingraham on Fox about the media's rush to judgment and the left's attacks on people wearing MAGA hats. Take a look.
Let him do his job. That's the job he was elected to do. And the media right now is really trying to subvert this democracy. They have done more to hurt the credibility of this country's institution as a democracy than anything in history.
Not only the president, but anyone who supports the president. Doesn't matter if you're 14 or you're my age or if you've so none of that matters.
A hat, Laura, because that must make you all sorts of things. I mean,
God forbid you wear a MAGA hat. Now, despite Laura Ingraham's tweet announcing the invite to the White House, when contacted by Breitbart News, White House aides did not confirm the report. Bloomberg News reporter Jennifer Jacobs went so far as to cite a White House official who said they had not been invited. They had not invited the students. But in the era of fake news, who can you believe anymore? Now, I personally would take Laura Ingraham and Don Jr. before any leftist news outlet or some White House aide who's outside the loop. However, this would not be the first time that the president met with supporters. Take a look at this. Do you remember this moment? Yes, President Trump met with supporters who were abused by the leftist hate mobs. The young man in the picture here is Connor Mullen. He's a teenager from South Portland, Maine, who was mocked by both students and teachers for wearing a Make America Great Again hat. Lucky for him, he got a private audience with the Republican nominee way back in August of 2016. Now Covington Catholic, Covington Latin, and the Diocese of Covington, as we reported earlier, they were closed on Tuesday in response to the uproar. Sadly, Homeland Security had to get involved over the child's smile. Here's a copy of the recording that the parents received as tweeted out by Cassandra Fairbanks minutes ago. Listen to this.
Good evening, parents. This is Mr. Rowe. Over the course of the last 4 days, we have spent a considerable amount of time consulting with local officials from surrounding cities and counties, Homeland Security, school administrators, and other safety officials regarding the situation that took place in Washington, D.C., and the subsequent events that have occurred. Our intent with all of these meetings was to ensure the safety and well-being of all the members of our learning community.
They just left that unguarded? This smells fishy to me. taken compromised a Red Legionary. It would explain how organized they've been. Without Oryx, I didn't think they could still, well, take.
Ikora and I will investigate. Meanwhile, contamination is clearing across the region. The Fallen are chattering about this on every feed. As much as I hate to admit it, we have a common goal when it comes to protecting this place. It's their home too. Welcome to Nessus. This planet is crawling with Vex. The Red Legion has sent in crews. We need to know why. Failsafe, are you online?
Commander, your favorite AI is primed and ready. I have prepared backdoors into several key Vex systems. We have detected a series of seismic disruptions. The Cabal may be responsible.
We need to know what we'll deal with. Yours are the boots on the ground, Guardian. Good luck.
On your right, a waterfall of Vex milk. Yes, Vex milk. Hey, failsafe, you're all cozy in your data core. Any advice on an energy shield?
I believe the nearby Vex constructs maintain that barrier.
Well, I could have... Okay, we'll shoot them.
Friendly query, what have you done to attract such hostile species to my planet?
Rest easy, failsafe. The Guardian has this.
Looks like the drills are manned by a full battalion of Cabal.
A full battalion? What is that to you, who have slain gods in the heart of the Black Garden?
Just so you know, I have detected a massive Vex energy signature.
And the only way to reach it is down past those giant pointy drill bits? Good. I think they want their drill back. I hope this is safe. The Cabal don't need to stick the landing. We do. Modular mine neutralized.
Well done. Failsafe, what's your assessment of this incident?
Vex records indicate the Cabal discovered the mine and dug into this world to capture it. Had the Red Legion achieved their goal, I estimate a 60% chance this planetoid would have been destroyed in the ensuing battles. Luckily, the captain stepped in.
are one of those people who think the government is hiding countless secrets from you and constantly covering things up, then you would be absolutely right. I'm one of the many people they hire to clean up their mistakes. I'm not entirely sure why they chose me, and there's really not that much special about me. But perhaps that's exactly why they chose me. I was already a loner, and I'm not going to cure cancer or create the next weapon of mass destruction, so I'm easily disposable. They approached me one day after I finished working my shift at a fast food joint. I'm not sure I had much of a choice, but my life was so dull I was ready for any kind of change-up anyways. The men who came up to my door didn't even tell me what I would be doing. Simply that if I wanted to aid my country, to follow them. I didn't look back once. As strange as my life has gotten, I still don't regret it. The next year of my life would be grueling. I was put through extreme physical and mental training. I learned about things I only thought existed in movies. I'm not sure what would have happened if I had failed the training, but I can't imagine they would have let me go back to my normal life. And not once did they mention what I was training for during the year. Not until I graduated. Upon getting the seal of approval from the higher-ups, I was brought into a small room with black suits and finally informed of what I would be doing. My new job would be hunting down failed experiments and other oddities that the government failed to contain. Not all jobs would be the same. Some would be relatively easy, while others would be next to impossible. Most missions would come with the option of bringing the target back, dead or alive. But of course, it would be preferable to always bring them back alive for further experimentation. My first assignment would be on the easy side. Codename, the Ice Cream Man. The Ice Cream Man, like most failed experiments, was at one point a human. He still had the appearance of one, your typical ice cream truck driver, but he's essentially a robot, only concerned with doing his job. So, what's so special about the Ice Cream Man? Well, I'm never told the why of the creatures I hunt, but I always put together my own ideas. The Ice Cream Man's truck is really the special part. The music that comes from the horns works as almost a human magnet. It entrances anyone within hearing distance to approach the truck. And once you approach the truck, you buy the ice cream. I've heard the ice cream tastes delicious, but of course, you'll never know for sure. Because the ice cream causes anybody who eats it to basically enter a huge state. For the next 12 hours after consuming the ice cream, you will carry on your day as you normally do, but you'll remember nothing the next day. I'm sure you can see why this would be a valuable asset to the government. Unfortunately, scientists put in charge of testing the ice cream underestimated it. Before they knew it, they had woken up 12 hours later, wondering where their test subject had gone. I'm sure I was given this simple assignment as sort of a test. I was given a pair of enhanced noise-blocking earplugs, and was sent on my way to the ice cream man's last known location. He wasn't hard to find. I just had to follow the massive vehicles that had lined up to get their sweet treat. I allowed him to serve everybody in the area. It would make my job of taking him much easier. Nobody could remember it. After everybody had their ice cream, I lined up myself. He attempted to serve me, but instead, I reached into the truck and injected him with a tranquilizer. He may only be a shell of a person now, but he's not immune to good old-fashioned medication. I tied him up and I hitched his truck to my vehicle. I dropped him off at the nearest government facility, and I awaited my next target. As I said, this would be one of the easier assignments. My next wouldn't be quite so simple. Codename, the Rippler. Unlike the Ice Cream Man, the Rippler was still mostly human. He hadn't lost his emotions, nor become a mindless zombie. And perhaps that was the problem. Through intense experimentation, The Rippler had gained the ability to create an intense concentrated earthquake. He had collapsed the facility that he was being stored in. The main concern with the Rippler was his danger to others around him. If he used his ability in a heavily populated area, countless lives could be lost. This is one of the few cases that have been advised to not bring the target back alive. Once again, I feel as though this assignment was a test. Just a different kind of test. The government wanted to see if I could kill for them without hesitation. And it's possible if I did, then there would be truly no escape for me. That was fine though. I had no intentions of leaving. The Rippler was a bit more difficult to find. Mostly because he wasn't trying to attract the attention of everybody around him. But if the government wants you, they will find you. He had relocated to a small town, changed his name, his face, everything in an attempt to escape. I almost felt bad for the guy. I doubt he had volunteered himself to be a guinea pig for the government, and now all he wanted was to live a normal life. Once I found the town that he was staying in, I made sure to keep my distance. I didn't want him going nuclear on me. I confirmed he was indeed my target by collecting some DNA samples from his trash. All that was left was to take him down. I didn't want to kill him, but I didn't have a lot of options. The scientist who had created him was still unsure of the extent of his powers and his ability to control them. Had I brought him in back alive, there's no telling if the government even had a facility capable of holding him. I did what I thought was best. After he returned home one night, I put a bulb between the Rippler's eyes. It wasn't a good feeling, but I continued to convince myself that it was necessary. I dropped his body off and I was thanked for my services. It wouldn't get easier from here either. My next target. Codename, Ghoul. This one was truly a monster. I'm not sure what the government was trying to create in Ghoul, but I don't think they got what they wanted. The Ghoul has enhanced strength and speed, but with one slight problem. He eats humans. Who knows? Maybe that's exactly what the government wanted. As you can imagine, Ghoul found a way to escape. After a while, you think these government scientists would get better at containing these experiments, but that doesn't seem to be the case. This mission might not have been so bad, but I was given strict orders that Ghoul was to be brought back alive. All my lethal weapons were stripped and replaced with tranquilizers strong enough to bring down a rhino. I put in a request to have a partner for this assignment, and of course I was swiftly denied. Ghoul had taken up residence in a forest, and this might not have been so bad if not for the fact that this forest had been an extremely popular hiking trail. There had always been frequent disappearances in the forest, a lot of them chalked up to suicides. But since Ghoul had escaped, that number had amplified significantly. The government did me a solid and got the trail shut down for the weekend, so it would just be me and Ghoul. I wouldn't have to worry about anybody else getting in the way. I've always wanted to go on a hiking date, but this wasn't quite what I had pictured. I set out into the forest looking for signs of his nest. I had made sure not to shower all week in preparation. If he came to me, it makes my job of dragging him back to the vehicle a lot easier, and I'm sure he would get hungry eventually. After about an hour of following markings and footprints that I assumed would belong to Ghoul, I began to come across bones. Human bones. So, I was getting closer. I followed the path for a few more minutes before I began to hear noises. Looks like my date had arrived. I heard tree branches shaking as he drew nearer. After only a few moments, he was standing on a large tree right in front of me. He looked down on me, studying me. He really wasn't that big. Maybe 5'6" with an average frame. But looks can be deceiving. His skin was a sickly yellow. His hair had begun to recede as if he was an old man. He was clearly much younger. His eyes were pure white, no longer containing anything else. After a brief stare down, he jumped. There was a good 50 feet between us, so I thought I would have a few seconds to ready myself, but I was wrong. As if he was a video game character, he soared from the tree and landed directly on top of me. I had just enough time to pull out a tranquilizer and shove it to the side, but it wasn't enough. Despite the strength of it, he seemed relatively unaffected. He shrugged it off and proceeded to take a chunk of flesh off my shoulder. I lay helpless as he began to chew on my flesh. I knew it wouldn't be long before he went back for seconds. I struggled to pull out another tranquilizer, but I managed to pull another one out right before he began to lunge in for another bite. I jammed the second directly into his neck. I felt his teeth begin to lock down on my own neck, but before he bit down, he passed out. I let out the biggest sigh of relief of my life, and I pushed him off of me. I placed the special restraints I had been given for him on, making sure the muzzle I was given for him was extra tight. I wasn't sure how long the tranks would last, but hopefully long enough for me to deliver this monster. Despite missing a chunk out of my shoulder, I had escaped alive. This was only one monster that science had created. I can only imagine what my future would have in store for me. After delivering Ghoul, I informed the higher-ups I would need at least a month off, and knowing what they had put me through, they obliged. If anything, they were impressed that I had come back in mostly one piece. Those were a few of my targets. I have many more tales to tell, but that will have to wait. I just received my next assignment, and I must begin preparations. If I survive, I will be sure to post more. So, I'll see you soon. Hopefully. I'm back, and I'm in one piece this time. Before I talk about more of my targets, I'm going to address a few concerns from my last post. A lot of you were concerned with that bite that I suffered from Ghoul. As far as I know, I haven't contracted anything. I was told whatever they did to him shouldn't be contagious, but I made them run some tests regardless, all of which came up negative. They did give me some special pills, but I was told these were to help speed up the recovery of the shoulder. It wouldn't surprise me if they were hiding something from me. I just hope that if I do start craving human flesh, I would still have enough mental fortitude to pull the trigger one last time. Another thing I wanted to address is who I work for. I only ever refer to my boss as the government. That is simply because I have no clue what branch this is. It's possible that this isn't the government at all, but I doubt that. It's far too ingrained not to be. It could be the CIA, but I'm not certain. The only questions I ask are the ones that will hopefully keep me alive longer. Now, let's talk about a few more of my assignments. After my month-long break/recovery from Ghoul, I was given an easier assignment to ease my way back into things. Codename, Romeo. Romeo was made to be a charmer, and that he was. He was a true Adonis in every sense of the word. But Romeo made the statue of David look ugly in comparison. From what I can tell, he was designed to charm women. Foreign diplomats, probably. But instead, he charms anyone and everyone. Which is how he was able to charm his way out of his holding cell. Romeo really isn't a danger to anyone, though. Except perhaps himself, should he find himself at the hands of an angry spouse. I'm sure he could get himself out of that one, too. Finding Romeo was easy, actually. But the hard part would be extracting him. He was always surrounded by a crowd, almost like a cult. If there were a high-class party, Romeo would be there, and he would never return to his room with less than 10 people following him. I would need a good plan to separate him from his entourage. I decided to attend one of his parties, just so I could get a better scope of the situation. It was crucial that I find any openings he might have. What I didn't expect, though, was for Romeo to approach me. Good evening, monsieur. I do not believe we have met before. I am Romeo. And you? Monsieur, was that French? I think I almost threw up a bit in my mouth. I guess I should have expected this, though. It was quite the ego, after all. It was good to see his charm wasn't working on me, though. I'm not entirely sure why, but I think it might have something to do with my disgust at just how perfect he is. Oh, I'm, James. I'm kind of new here. Nice to meet you, Romeo. I managed to respond. James, what a fabulous name. But alone at a party? Unacceptable. Come with me. My friends and I are about to return to my estate. I will show you the finer parts of the city. Is that a sexual reference? Regardless, this was going much better than I'd expected. I was making direct contact with my target. If I went to his home, perhaps I could just wait until everybody fell asleep and sneak away with Romeo before anybody else knew better. I don't know. We just met. I wouldn't want to impose on you like that, I said, trying to play hard to get. No, I insist, you must. Samantha, go with my friend James here and guide him to my home. I will be there shortly. There is somebody that I must see first. Romeo replied while motioning to one of the women from his group. Samantha did indeed guide me to Romeo's home. I already knew where he lived, of course, but I had to play dumb. Romeo's estate was a true mansion, with aesthetics that would make somebody think that they had designed the home in the game, The Sims. I was escorted inside. The rest of Romeo's entourage would arrive shortly after. I was offered some scotch that had apparently been aged over 100 years. I'm not much of a drinker, but I accepted it nonetheless. Romeo arrived almost an hour later, fashionably late to his own party. Once he arrived, he immediately approached me. James, follow me. There is something I must show you, he said to me. I didn't hesitate to follow him. This was my chance to be alone with him. I could tranquilize him and be on my way before anybody else knew better. He led me to a room on the other side of the home. The room was something else, something I didn't expect. The walls were covered with pictures, men and women. Each one was a different person. I think I even noticed a few of them from his group. What is this? I said without even thinking. These are all the people I have conquered, and you are the next. Please, remove your clothing. Romeo said this as he turned his back on me and began removing his own clothing. I almost felt compelled to remove my clothes. His words held so much power, but I was able to hold out. Instead, I approached him and I sunk the trank into his neck. I made sure to duct tape his mouth. I had heard enough of his words for one night. Romeo was much bigger than me, so it was quite an effort dragging him out of his window and back to my vehicle. But I managed to do it before anybody got suspicious. I assumed his friends simply thought that he was trying to take his time to conquer me. I dropped off Romeo, and I made sure to shower extra well that night. My experience with Romeo also made me miss my date with Ghoul. Almost. My next assignment would be another fun one. Codename Kong. So what happens when you splice human DNA with gorilla DNA? Well, apparently, you get Kong. Personally, I would have preferred the name Caesar in reference to Planet of the Apes. But I suppose he's not a gorilla. I don't get to pick the names anyway. Kong is essentially a smaller version of Bigfoot. And before you ask if Bigfoot exists, I have to say that I don't know. I haven't been tasked with hunting him down yet. Kong would be a kill task. There's no guarantee that the tranks would work. And if they did, for how long? And not to mention, he had killed 2 scientists when he had escaped, so they weren't too worried about him coming back alive. They just wanted to dissect what was left of him. I was given specific parameters to avoid the head if at all possible, and they mostly wanted to examine the brain. And that wouldn't be possible if I had splattered it all on the ground. Another problem I faced was my experience with long-range weapons. It had been a part of my training, of course, and I had gone through the basics, but that was about it. I had been told that most of my missions would be up close and personal anyway, so it wasn't that important. Well, it was starting to seem very important now. Similar to Ghoul, Kong had taken up residence in a forested area, but since his diet didn't consist of human meat, he had chosen a much more secluded area. I don't think Kong really wanted to hurt anyone. He could have lived his life out in these woods, never bothering anyone. But that's not what the government wanted. My superiors informed me that they had already done overhead sweeps of the area. They were able to tell me exactly where the cave he was staying in was located. Of course, they had done the easy part, and I would get to do all the dirty work on the ground. I made my way over to the vantage point overlooking the cave, and I set up the sniper rifle they had supplied me with. Now all that I had to do was wait. After a few hours, Kong finally made his appearance. He walked out of the cave and he began to stretch his limbs, the way most of us do after we wake up. I steadied the rifle and I aimed the crosshairs over where I would assume his heart was, and I pulled the trigger. I missed. I hadn't taken into account that the wind had picked up since I had started waiting, and the bullet had strayed to the right of Kong, hitting the rock of the cave. Kong didn't move though. Instead, he simply turned his gaze to me, with eyes that were all too human. He didn't try to escape. He knew I would come eventually, and if it wasn't me, it would be someone else. Kong had accepted his fate. I had killed the Rippler, of course. That was different. I had done that while he was asleep. I didn't have to see the look in his eyes before he died. I almost wish Kong had been a monster like Ghoul, and that way I wouldn't have to feel bad about putting him down. But with a slight hesitation, I reloaded my gun, took aim accounting for the wind now, and I fired once again. Bullseye.
Hi there.
Kong went down instantly. I made my way over to confirm that he was dead, and luckily he was. He wouldn't have to suffer anymore.
No word from Fenchurch today.
Kong weighed far too much for me to drag back on my own, so instead, I set off a flare I had been given for this moment, and waited for the air team to come and collect him.
Hi again.
Sitting next to Kong's lifeless body really made me begin to question my line of work.
Anything you want?
I had never felt so disgusted in my life, but I knew there was no way out of it for me.
Anything for you?
I'm already in far too deep. And perhaps the government has created another monster in me, and someday they'll have to put me down too. But for now, I'm still doing their dirty work.
Take a look.
If you'll excuse me, writing about Kong has really brought my mood down. I'll be back. I'll be sure to include one of my more exciting assignments next time.
Always a pleasure.
But I think I need to lie down for a bit. Until next time. I'm back, and with me, I bring a few more of my assignments. I'm not sure how much time I have, so I'll jump right into it. First up, codename Delilah. Delilah is, well, a doll. A ventriloquist doll, to be exact.
Again, Guardian.
And despite her simple looks, she's quite dangerous. Probably not in the way that most of you would expect, though. She can't move on her own. Well, she can speak, but that's it. So she won't be running around your home in the middle of the night stabbing people. No, instead Delilah has an incredibly strong power of influence. One look in her eyes and she'll have complete control over you. It's a bit ironic, really. A ventriloquist doll making humans her puppets. In my briefing, I was told Delilah is essentially the definition of sadistic. She enjoys making her victims inflict as much pain as possible, before eventually disposing of them. I'm not sure if the demons are real, but if they are, I'm sure that's what's trapped in that doll. Delilah was believed to be staying with a family of 4. She had been taken there by a scientist who had fallen under her control. She's only been gone for about a week, but there's no telling what she could have gotten up to during that time. The scientist who had taken her had returned to her workplace a day later and had attempted to murder her co-workers. That was quickly taken care of. I made my way to the family's home, hoping to be surprised by what I saw. Let's just say, I got my wish, but not in the way that I'd hoped. I knocked on the front door, and after a few minutes of no response, I turned the handle to find that the door was unlocked. I wish I hadn't. The moment I stepped into the home, I was hit with a putrid smell, one that I know means death. The walls were coated in blood. Some of it was dried. Some was fresh and still slowly dripping down. I found the family together in the living room. Mother and the 2 children were sat in a small triangle. They're already dead and rotted. Their stomachs had been cut open, with their entrails hanging out. They had been posed in a way to make it look as if they're eating their own organs. In the center of that triangle was the father, hanging from the ceiling. He had scratches and cuts all across him, but that was nothing compared to what had happened to his family. Just before I was about to spill my lunch all over the floor, I heard a voice from the